Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope everyone's enjoying the autumn leaves and the gust of the summer wind, what's left of it anyways. I certainly am, where I'm from, although I would prefer it to be a bit colder, and that's just me. In saying that though, I wonder what the weather is like in Hawaii nowadays. And I've also been wondering if the game that I played through not too long ago accurately describes and illustrates the day in the life of a Hawaiian citizen. Those that don't know, I'd recently covered Retro City Rampage, which is essentially an 8-bit GTA inspired game full of pop culture references and comedic moments in a very bizarre setting, in what was originally supposed to be a GTA 3 remake more or less. Although if you want to be technical, GTA Advance kinda does that already. Retro City Rampage is a game that I enjoyed quite a lot, and the developers behind it would end up making a spiritual successor to it that also has GTA influences in its 16-bit veins, which belongs to this game in particular, Shakedown Hawaii. It's a game that took some lessons from Retro City Rampage, doubled the bits, and would offer a somewhat similar but different experience at the same time. Like its predecessor, it's heavily inspired by the 2D universe of GTA. And those that are unfamiliar, GTA throughout its history has 3 different universes, 2D, 3D, and HD. Both Retro City Rampage and Shakedown Hawaii have more in common with the first 2 GTA titles, but are ultimately more like GTA 1 and 2 with more fluff on top of it, with more story and characters, better controls, and cleaner visuals in the pixel department. When I finished Retro City Rampage, it just made sense for me to jump straight into Shakedown Hawaii, and I was pretty excited to jump into it, considering the fact that I generally prefer 16-bit games over the 8-bit ones, and after about 9 hours of playtime, I can say that the game is pretty good, but also has its cons and is quite repetitive, and admittedly, I would experience some fatigue even though I was nearing the end of its story. So let's get into the 16-bit ridden tropical land of opportunity, shall we? The game's plot revolves around the CEO, who is the main character that has a failing business on the verge of total collapse. Your character was at home all this time, watching business tips on TV on how to further increase margins, tapping into unknown but potentially lucrative opportunities that no one else apparently knows about. All the while the company, feeble multinational, was crumbling outside of his martini-soaked living room. As a result, the CEO decides that he is going to save his company by any, and I mean by any means necessary. What starts is a long and repetitive road of corporate acquisition of Hawaii's many properties and businesses, from convenience stores, gun shops, hospitals, shopping malls, auto shops, houses, hotels, resorts, apartments, hair salons, beauty parlors, the list goes on. The CEO, with his infinite well of business knowledge and expertise, comes up with many amazing ideas across the businesses and properties that he owns, so that things go up instead of going down. From mission to mission, they will all be in service of increasing the company's daily revenue, as well as the value of your total assets, so that you can buy and upgrade even more properties and assets that are on the map. And property acquisition and management is a big part of the game, or at least if you're doing the story anyways. At first, it's a slow process. You won't have a lot of money, and every time you buy more properties and businesses, the property value in the area also goes up, meaning that you'll need more money to buy other properties. So then it becomes this game of growing your revenue stream while you pass time in between by doing 2 things: the missions themselves, and of course, playing as a disguised character, working for the company, of course, or, contracted out to do shakedowns, for protection. To buy more businesses, you need to be doing both at the same time, but the shakedowns don't take as long, even though there's over 80 of them to do. They consist of intimidating the business owners in one way or another, with the end result of being someone who is not the CEO, of course, but a different character entirely, having their demands met and their slice of the pie received. And all of this is in support of local businesses, of course. As you can tell, the game's main theme is centralized on capitalism and corporate influence on everyday life, with credit cards being everywhere, you have to subscribe and pay convenience fees for just about anything. The CEO gets frustrated by all of this, but he also gets motivated to make it a part of his everyday operation. Other characters and other games would find a way to stop it completely, seeing it as a total injustice. But the CEO is instead asking the question, why aren't we doing this ourselves? And he has the mind to redirect all of these business practices into his own empire, so he also benefits off of it. Retro City Rampage, on the other hand, was a collection of different tropes and references in pop culture and gaming, but Shakedown Hawaii has a more focused theme that is pretty consistent, and all revolving around business and corporatism. And the game does still maintain a comedic tone to it all. I don't really know anything about marketing or how to run a business, but I do like big numbers, and as you continue investing into the game's property system, you'll see those profits go up very quickly. And there's hundreds of properties in the game to buy up and upgrades with various offers, which are called marketing multipliers. All they do is increase the value and revenue of the place you select. When you offer things like targeted ads and convenience fees, gift cards, unrefined products, and marketing spins, you can get a lot more money out of that property than without it. When you monopolize a business by buying up all the associated properties on top of the upgrades, you'll earn stupid money pretty quickly. But the problem is that if you do it right, you'll end up with more money than what you can use it with by the time you finish the game, and by that point, there's not a whole lot you can do with that money at all. And what's even worse is the lack of challenge in the game overall. You have 2 difficulties to select before you start a new game, but it won't really matter because you're never really going to struggle. You can get health pickups if you're low while in combat, and even if you die, you get all of your health back and can pretty much just brute force your way through the really short and long list of missions that the game has. And that's another thing, the missions themselves. There are a lot of them, and a lot of them are very short. So much so that they end up being finished before they ever really begin. And a lot of them make you do the same sort of stuff, and you begin to realize how much of a chore it really becomes as you get near the end of the game. There's over 100 missions that are all in the efforts of rebuilding your empire and taking over the island. For the vast majority of the game, you'll be playing as the CEO, but sometimes you'll also play as his son, Scooter, a self-proclaimed DJ that dreams of hitting the stages and dropping the mic, but is moseying around and still doesn't have a job, and is kind of just a lazy fuck. Then you have Al, a contractor who is employed to handle the transfer of property ownership by his own means, and not of the companies, of course, which they take no responsibility. But the CEO is the one running the chaotic show and will turn every eye-gouging method of payment for services into an opportunity for more profits, which is only fitting for the smart businessman that he is. Throughout this journey, you'll meet some of the other staff, including your own second-in-command, who always has an underlying feeling of doubt that the CEO can even succeed in restoring the company and being on the up. But he won't bow down to Featherbottom, the opposing mogul who wishes to take over his business for his own personal interests and his own gain. And in this feud is a rivalry with the level of intensity only shared between the likes of Zero and Berkeley from GTA San Andreas. You also have gang members out for the DJ's blood, on top of farmers who you send Al to consult with. Everything is for the taking in this game, and it's up to you to learn the tricks of the trade and give the people what they want, which are HD tickets to watch the latest movies for only $60. When I was playing through this game, I was also reminded of Vice City Stories. And in that game, you had properties and businesses that you could also get into. But that game handled it much better and also had something in it that Shakedown Hawaii doesn't have. And what Vice City Stories had were persistent threats. In Shakedown Hawaii, when you shake down a business or acquire a new property, you don't have to ever worry about it again. But in Vice City Stories, there were gangs and other organizations that would threaten your ownership of those properties, and you would have to stop them before they take over. Nowadays, it is annoying to deal with because of how frequently it comes up, but it made you work to keep your empire, and in that sort of world, there's always people wanting the slice of the pie, or wanting the whole pie. In Shakedown Hawaii though, you're just hoarding shit with no consequences in return. You'll never have to do a shakedown again afterwards, and you'll never have to fend off other companies or businesses that threaten your territory unless you're doing the missions. I did all of the shakedowns and all of the missions while buying a good number of properties, but afterwards I had no reason to continue on with it, and all you have left is to find collectibles, do the arcade challenges, and buy up and upgrade the rest of the properties. It's a neat idea and it plays into the game's narrative and story, but it's also a pretty shallow system that gets repetitive and ultimately just becomes meaningless by the end. The gameplay is fun at times, and other times it's just okay. The driving feels pretty good no matter what vehicle you have, and there's even boats to ride on. But the shooting and the combat is somewhat clunky, and there were times where I couldn't move in certain directions while shooting, or there would be input delays when I would perform one action while wanting to do the other at the same time. The range of weapons and vehicles are decent for the most part, with some being more of a liability, like the flamethrower, where enemies will still be able to run and shoot at you before they die, putting you at risk of being on fire, to the point where the weapon just isn't worth using in most cases. But a lot of the other weapons, and even some of the utility-based ones, seem to handle better, and depending on the opponents you face, you'll need to find the right one for the job. Just don't use the flamethrower unless the mission specifically requests you to do so. To be honest, I kind of like the weapons in Retro City Rampage as well as the vehicles a bit more, and that's largely due to the more whimsical and comedic nature of the world in that game, whereas Shakedown is still pretty comedic but feels a lot more grounded in comparison. The world itself, while beautiful to look at in its array of 16-bit sprites and choice of colors, isn't quite as memorable as the place in Retro City Rampage, and I think that's largely due to the fact that you had more points of interest that stood out in Retro City Rampage, whereas in Shakedown Hawaii, everything just kind of blends in, where I would just mostly forget a lot of the places I go to, and that's not to say that the game's map and design is necessarily bad, it's just not that memorable, that's all. In terms of the sound and the music, it's pretty mixed as well. The vehicles and the weapons, the explosions, they all sound fine, but the music is very on and off for me. Retro City Rampage had a good variety of 8-bit tracks across radio stations with names that gave it an aesthetic, a different taste in its themes. In Shakedown though, the game just has a number of FMs, like FM 1 to 12, with tracks that either endlessly loop or randomly change as you keep playing through the game, and some of the tracks were pretty good and some were just okay and forgettable. But overall, it just got to a point where it just blended in with the rest of the game and I just didn't really think about it too much. And the more I thought about my experience overall with Shakedown Hawaii, the more I realized just how much more I liked Retro City Rampage as a game in my opinion. And Shakedown Hawaii has some great sprite work, the driving feels good, sometimes the rampages can be fun, you have different clothes and accessories to change the look of your characters if you're into that. The themes of parodying shady business practices is an interesting adventure, but it's also held back by a large quantity of short, easy, and repetitive missions that doesn't really provide much of a challenge. Money becomes pretty meaningless once you have a snowball of profits going in the property system, and the combat is somewhat flaky on its inputs. Retro City Rampage and Shakedown are both games I really enjoyed, but if I had to pick a game that I would replay, it would probably have to be Retro City Rampage since I found that game more fun overall. Shakedown Hawaii is still a fun time though, and if you're looking for more GTA-inspired games, more specifically 1 and 2, then this is still one worth picking up, and even better on a sale. And who knows, maybe all the business tips will turn you into the business mogul you always wanted to be, at least in Shakedown Hawaii anyways. Thanks for watching.